the worship team for doing a great job on that special this morning. BBS has us using only one door, so give them just a moment. All right. Getting started with a new series today, and as we kick it off, let's start it off with the story of Melvin Dummar. How many of you have heard of Melvin Dummar? If any of you raise your hand, I bet you're lying, so that's good. I didn't see any hands up. Melvin Dummar, story goes back to 1968. And Dummar was a gas station owner with his wife Bonnie, raising 4 kids ages 8 to 13 years old in the small town of Willard, Utah. And on this particular day, Melvin Dummar had to drive to Los Angeles for business. And he wasn't that far from home when he noticed that there was a man on the side of the road. And so he pulled over to see if the man needed help because he was walking in the middle of nowhere. He noticed the guy was kind of disheveled looking. His hair was uncombed, his clothes were dirty, and his face had all kinds of cuts all over it. And the man explained he had been walking for some time, which explained his appearance. And the cuts on his face were from a motorcycle accident he had recently. Well, Dummar opened his car door and he offered to take him to a hospital to get some help. The man said, "Really, I'm on my way to Las Vegas." And Dummar said, "Well, that's on my way to Los Angeles. I'll be glad to give you a ride." So off they went. And they talked all the way there, talked about their, he talked about his gas station and everything that went with it. Eventually they pulled up into Las Vegas, and he wanted to go to the back of the Sands Hotel. And so Dummar drops him off back there, and as he's getting out, he said, "Hey, I hate to be a pain, but do you have some change I could borrow to make a phone call?" Young people, there were these pay phones, and you actually had to put coins in them to make a phone call. It's really weird, but that's what it was. And so he asked if he had any coins. And so he gave him some pocket change, and the man thanked him and wished him luck, and off he drove to Los Angeles. And Melvin Dummar never thought about that again until 1976, 8 years later. See, Melvin Dummar was at home when he got a call from an attorney. At first he told him, "Oh, you have the wrong number, I don't know what you're talking about." But the attorney went on to explain that Dummar had been listed as a partial beneficiary in someone's estate, in a will. And he was to receive 1/16 of the entire estate. And the reason he was named in the will, according to the will, is he picked up a stranger on the side of the road, and he drove him to a hotel and gave him change to make a phone call. The attorney went on to explain that the man he picked up was a man by the name of Howard Hughes, the American aviator, business tycoon, and filmmaker. When he died, he was worth $2.5 billion. The attorney told him, "Melvin, you should inherit $125 million. Being interviewed by reporters, Dummar said, "I can't believe it. To be honest, I thought I was helping a bum." It never occurred to him that by helping out a stranger, he was in fact helping out himself. Now, in full disclosure, the story appears to be completely legitimate and true, except for one tiny detail. The family contested the will because they did not want $125 million leaving the estate. So it does not appear Dummar ever actually got the money. But it does appear that the thought was there. Jesus tells a very similar story, but with a different ending. It's a story that we're all very familiar with, but let's read it together this morning. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil, and wine, and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man. If the bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here." We begin a brand new series this morning called Get Off Your Donkey. And it's entirely based on the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, I love this parable, and I love studying the parables of Jesus. And so, we've been studying them this summer, and now we get to this one. And there's a problem when we study the Good Samaritan. You know what the problem is? You all know the story so well. I mean, how many of you know this story, okay? How many of you have heard the phrase Good Samaritan before? We've all heard it. We've all interacted with it. We know the Good Samaritan. And we're really going to spend 4 weeks diving into this story. So that's what becomes really hard about teaching this parable, is you know it so well. But here, I want to just work with you here for a minute. And so what I want you to do is I want you to have a little interaction with those sitting next to you. If you're not sitting next to someone, scoot over. And here's what I want you to do. In one sentence, how many sentences?
One.
All right, you're listening good. In one sentence, I want you to explain what the Good Samaritan means. What it means to be a Good Samaritan. Not the story itself. What does it mean to be a Good Samaritan? One sentence. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not a book. One sentence. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. So share with your neighbor, and then neighbors share back. Ready, get set, go.
What's yours, Missy?
You go first.
It's a complete
15 seconds.
Don't judge. Don't judge me.
I'd say most of you kept it to one sentence. You're almost all done talking already. That's good. That's good. All right, very good. Now, I was trying to eavesdrop on everybody. I wanted to hear what you were saying. And I heard words like nice, helpful, sacrifice, serving others, doing good. Those were good. And so as I give you that goal, I actually took some time to think about it before I wrote out the whole sermon. And so I wanted to come up with my one-sentence definition, and it was helping the person in need who is near you. That's just my one-sentence definition of what a Good Samaritan is. And as I thought about it, we're all partially right. Being nice, serving others, doing good, helping people. That is right. That is partially what it's all about. Now, as we alluded to earlier, if you've seen any bit of news this week, you know it's been pretty bad for our country. Civilians and police officers attacked, killed. It's a very disturbing time for our country. A very, very big feeling of disharmony and disunity like we haven't seen for a little while. And so what I want to do is I want to restore our faith in humanity a little bit today. And I want to show you some pictures of some Good Samaritans, some people who made a difference in someone's life. Pictures can say 1,000 words, so let's look at it in pictures. Let's begin with this one right here. All right, let's go to the next one here. That's the next one. All right, here we go, right here. All right, the gentleman there that we see helping the lady with her bags, he was running late for his train, and he was running to get on in the subway, and he turned and he saw this elderly lady struggling down the stairs, and he stopped. And his train took off, and he turned around and he helped her with her bags so she could get on her train safely and on time. We don't know what he was running late for, but we know he stopped to help out. All right, let's go to the next one here. The runner there on the right is runner Jacqueline Kilpino, and she was running in a marathon in China. Temperature soared, dehydration was a serious risk. And so there's a runner from Taiwan next to her. Obviously, he's without hands, and she slowed down her pace so that she might help him get a drink of water in the soaring heat. We have this picture here. You'll see this elevator broke down, and they were stuck between floors, and the workers were working on it. Time was going along. This lady was having a hard time standing. So a young man in the elevator got down on all fours, became a human bench, so she could sit down and rest her legs. Finally, we have this picture here today. This is a security guard at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. Whenever he sees a little girl dressed up like a princess, he pulls out an autograph book and a pen, and he asks them for their autograph. He says they're always surprised and excited, and they give their autographs because, of course, they're the real princess. Some people are so nice, it can bring tears to your eyes. These Good Samaritans should be applauded. But if we think the story of the Good Samaritan is about being nice, we've missed the very reason Jesus told the story. It's way more than being nice. The story of the Good Samaritan is a radical call to something a lot more than doing good to the person next to you. That's part of it, but that's not the complete picture. So let me ask that audience question this morning. How many of you watch Seinfeld reruns? Okay, I don't. It was kind of a setup, I'm sorry. But I've never gotten into the show. But the very last episode, they took a shot at defining the story of the Good Samaritan and what it's all about. So we're going to watch 2 clips. They run together, and so we'll just watch. So when it goes black, it's not over yet. We got another clip coming in right after it. So let's just watch the scene play out, as they depict their version of the Good Samaritan. So let's go ahead.
Capture this. That's a shame.
Officer! He's stealing my car! Officer, I was carjacked. I was held up at gunpoint. He took my wallet, everything.
Okay, thanks anyway. They can't get it on the plane. What's wrong with the plane we got? They're just checking it out. No, not getting on there. Come on, let's get something to eat here in Sticksville.
All right. Hold it right there.
What?
You're under arrest.
Under arrest? What for?
Article 223-7 of the Lakeland County Penal Code.
What? No, we didn't do anything.
That's exactly right. The law requires you to help or assist anyone in danger as long as it's reasonable to do so.
I never heard of that.
It's new. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. Let's go.
Good Samaritan law? Are you crazy?
Why would we want to help somebody? That's what nuns and Red Cross workers are. Dangerous. Very.
I think my favorite line is your favorite line. When George says, why would we want to help people? That's what nuns and Red Cross workers are for. Let's go back to Luke chapter 10 to try to really explain what the Good Samaritan story is all about. The whole story starts off with a question and Jesus' response. And of course, it's a great question. It's a wonderful question. The question is, what should I do to inherit eternal life? And so what we call the story of the Good Samaritan is a response by Jesus to that question. But let's be fair. Let's take everything in context. The question was not asked in the nicest of ways. Luke 10, beginning at verse 25. One day an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question. Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus replied, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it? The man said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Right, Jesus told him, do this and you will live. The man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? So the teacher of the law says, got up not to find out this important answer. He got up to question Jesus, to test him. He wasn't interested in Jesus giving an answer to help him. He wanted to try to trip Jesus up. He wanted Jesus to say something wrong, so he tested him. And Jesus says, hey, you're an expert in the law. How do you read it? How do you interpret it? Jesus is saying, come on, like you don't know the answer. And so that he says, well, you love God and love your neighbor. And Jesus says, correct. Now there's a newer translation. And what Jesus actually says is, duh. You know, I mean, he knows this. He's a teacher. Of course he knows the answer. But then it says the man wanted to justify his actions. And so he asked, who is my neighbor? And so Jesus had to deal with this prejudice that was in the first century. Prejudice happens in all eras at all times, but these people dealt with it in a different way. There were some teachings that allowed for it. Let's go to Leviticus 19:18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. In other words, a neighbor is anyone who is an Israelite, like yourself, or follows the faith of the Israelites. A foreigner can become an Israelite in many different ways, and so they could become people of faith as well. And so as long as they were in the same faith circle as you, they were considered your neighbor. Now there were universal laws on how to treat people. Do not lie, do not murder, do not covet, don't sleep with somebody who's not your spouse. And those were laws that just covered everyone. But then there were some laws that were more made a distinction between people. For example, Deuteronomy chapter 23 says, you could not charge interest to a fellow Israelite on a loan, but you could to a foreigner. So Jesus was teaching something that wasn't contrary to the law, but it was definitely against the social and preconceived notions of the day. For the people in Jesus' day, the rabbis further restricted who your neighbor was. For them, a neighbor was a Jew who strictly observed the law. That's what it meant to be a neighbor. Other people were hated as enemies. Jesus said, you've heard it been taught, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. Jesus sought to broaden the definition of neighbor to its proper context. So neighbors included enemies, and that means we should love our neighbors, and we should do good to them. His most comprehensive definition of neighbor came in a parable that we're reading today in Luke chapter 10. Through this whole story, Jesus presents us with some radical truths that can give us not only eternal life, but fulfillment in this life as we wait the day when we join him in heaven. So let's look at these radical truths today. Number one is this: your neighbors need you. Your neighbors need you. You might be thinking, my neighbors need me? My neighbors seem fine. I wish I was doing as good as my neighbors were. Well, the first radical truth in the story is a redefinition of neighbor. Jesus redefines neighbor as anyone in need. So it doesn't matter if you're helping someone down the street or across the world. It doesn't matter if they look just like you or they couldn't look more different. It doesn't matter if they're a friend or an enemy. Our neighbor is the one in need. There are people all around us every day that need our help. Every day we go past somebody who needs something from us. There are people who are hurting from the past. They have the pain of a broken family, a parent who was absent or abusive, a divorce that was devastating. They need someone to encourage them and help them. There are people struggling with addictions of drugs and alcohol and sex and divisiveness, and they need someone to help them overcome these temptations. There are people with financial needs. They wonder, where's the next meal going to come from? Is the rent going to be paid on time? Is the car going to get repossessed tomorrow? And they need someone to help them understand how to control their finances, how to increase their income, how to deal with the stress of bad money problems. We have kids that are in need, kids that need a home. They may have a roof over their head, but it's anything but a home. Kids that need a tutor. They go to school, but they're not learning right. Kids that need a coach, they have a glove, but no one to teach them how to play. And then, of course, not to mention anybody with a physical or mental handicap, they need someone to help them even more. In an ever-shrinking world, we are made more and more aware of the global needs of our neighbors. Whether it's neighbors living in a third-world country that live on $2 a day, neighbors who don't have access to clean water, neighbors whose kids statistically won't make it past age 6. I'm telling you, if you will open your eyes and ears, you will find that we live in a world of really needy people. And maybe you are in need here today. Yesterday you walked past someone who was in need. You may not have noticed it, but someone was in need. Tomorrow, God's going to place someone in your life that you can help if you'll open your eyes and open your ears and be in tune with what God is leading you to do. But today, you will discover the radical truth: somebody needs you. You may say, well, not me. Yes, you. Every one of you here today, somebody needs you. Jesus said the fields are ripe for harvest and the workers are few. That's about sharing the good news of Jesus. And guess what? The best way to share the good news is be the good news. Your neighbors need you so desperately. Radical truth number 2, empathy is not enough. Feeling sorry for people. For a moment, being empathetic is not enough. When people down the street are going through foreclosure, we don't say, oh man, too bad. It's not enough. When a tornado rips up Joplin, Missouri, shaking your head saying, that's a shame. It's not enough. You know, when you see the guy and gal at work who seem to be depressed and they're going through a tough time and you wish they would get close to God, wishing it is not enough. Watching the news and watching police officers and civilians killed, firing an angry response to the TV is not enough. The reason that many people never experience fulfillment in life or look forward to heaven, and that Jesus is describing, is we settle for being empathetic, and that's not enough. To change our world, we need more and more Christians and churches understanding this truth. Empathy won't cut it anymore. Jess Slayer once defined empathy as your pain in my heart. Well, to hear someone say, I feel your pain, doesn't alleviate the pain. Seeing people in need and feeling bad won't cut it. It's not enough. And so that leads us to our third radical truth and the whole premise of the series. Get off your donkey. If you want eternal life, you have to get off your donkey. Notice in the story there are 2 people who saw the man in need, and they intentionally walked past him on the other side of the road. And those two were the most religious, so beware. There are lots of forces in your life that will push you to settle for doing nothing. Because religion can get you in the way from getting off your donkey. You can say, well, I'm already serving in many ways. I mean, I greet at church. I help out in various ways. The kids program has my assistance. Somebody else needs to step up. Skepticism will get in the way from you getting off your donkey. Maybe you find yourself being skeptical, saying, you know what, I've heard a lot of these charities keep the money to themselves, and it doesn't really get to the people in need. I wonder if I'm just being ripped off. I don't want to be taken for a sucker. Or maybe you're in such a big hurry, you don't have time to get off your donkey. I'd love to help, but I've got places to go, and I've got things to do. I've got people counting on me. Maybe next time. Next week, we're going to dive into this a lot more in depth about what keeps us on our donkeys. But today, let's summarize by saying the Samaritan got off his donkey because he saw a need. It's not more complicated than that. He saw a need, and he used whatever means he had to make a difference. He used his own oil and wine, which at that time, that's what you used for medication and healing. He used his own donkey to take the man to the inn. He used some of his own money to keep the man there and promised to pay more if the bill ran high. He doesn't promise more than he can do. He doesn't try to do more than he could. He did no more and no less than God enabled him to do. The Good Samaritan is described by Jesus as the one who recognized the hurting neighbor and does something about it. He gets off his donkey. One of my favorite preachers to listen to preach passed away just a little over a week ago. His name was Wayne Smith. He preached in Lexington, Kentucky for a few decades, leading a church to over 3,000 in average attendance on weekends. He was known for his great sense of humor, so to honor his memory and his preaching, I'd like to tell you one of my favorite jokes he ever told. It's about the scoutmaster who was trying to drive the point of the Good Samaritan home to the Boy Scouts he was leading. So he took him to a central park in town one morning. He said, I want you to go out for 2 hours and do good deeds for people. Help them out. Be a good Samaritan, and then come back and we're going to share what we did. 5 minutes after they dispersed, little Johnny comes back to the scout troop. And the scoutmaster says, hey, I thought I told you to go do good deeds. And little Johnny says, I did. Now, the scoutmaster knew little Johnny liked to cut corners, and he liked to try to avoid doing anything that was responsible. And so the scoutmaster said, what did you do? Little Johnny said, I helped the little old lady cross the street. And the scoutmaster said, where? And the little boy pointed, and the scoutmaster looks over, and sure enough, there's a little old lady. But then he says, but why is her shirt torn? Little Johnny said, she didn't want to go. When we seek to help people by getting off our donkeys, we need to make sure that we're really helping them, not enabling bad behavior or addictions, not shying away from their real needs. Yeah, they might need help with food this week, but maybe they really need financial counseling. Or yeah, they might need help avoiding that problem. Maybe they need an accountability partner to talk to them each and every day. We need to see the real needs and seek to meet those needs. We will find that the donkey in our lives can be many different things. It can be laziness, a couch that wants us to watch one more show, or if I want to get real personal, watch one more ball game. It can be a crazy schedule of places to go. It can be anything that prevents us from meeting the needs of those around us, from stopping to help our neighbor. If we want to learn anything from the story of the Good Samaritan, so we need to get off our donkey. And the radical truth number 4 is you help yourself by helping others. You help yourself by helping other people. When we really discover this truth, it's going to make a difference. The professor from the University of California recently put together a paper based on extensive research that concluded with this quote: we have found widespread support for the notion that people with a tendency toward depression can help themselves by helping others. They call it positive activity interventions. And they said small things like helping someone with their groceries, writing a thank you note, or even saying a prayer for someone can be a low-cost treatment for depression. It's been life-changing for me to consider this. I've never really looked at someone I needed to help and said it's going to help me. If I don't help them, I'm the one that's really missing out. It never occurred to me. But that's the truth that Jesus is teaching, and it's the truth that's being verified time and time again. So by not being the Good Samaritan, we might be the people who miss out. Now, we may not miss out to the tune of $125 million, okay? Let's be fair. But we will miss out on something a lot more valuable than that. What must I do to inherit eternal life. It's amazing what we've all thought about. Life would be so much better if I had just a few more dollars. Oh, I'd make everything good. The budget could go further. Oh, that'd be nice. We fooled ourselves into thinking the bigger car, the bigger house, a little more vacation time, a little more sleep, that'll take care of it. It's always nice to have a little bit more, but it always leaves us in the same place we started. Something's missing. So the best way, according to this story, to get the most out of life is to stop trying to do more for ourselves and start seeing the needs of those of others. And we respond by getting off our donkeys. So today we are left with a choice to make. And the choice is this: will you get off your donkey? This is a choice we face every single day, as individuals and as a church. Every day we have a choice to make. Will we get off our donkey? Well, as the worship team is going to join me on stage here, I'd like to share one more story with you, and that's from preacher Morris Chalfant. It tells the story of a couple who celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, their golden anniversary, 50 years of love and life together. And the husband was asked, what is the secret to a happy marriage, a marriage that would last so long? And as is often the case, he couldn't just tell you a one-sentence answer. He had to give a story. He said he grew up in an orphanage, and he worked hard for everything he ever had. And the only girl he ever dated was his wife, Sarah, because he was so busy working and trying to provide for his own needs, he didn't have time for that. But she swept him off his feet. Before long, they were dating, engaged, and just a few short months later, they were married. Well, on the day of the wedding, right after they had said their vows and came off the stage, Sarah's father took his new son-in-law off to the side. And he handed him a small gift. And inside, he said, within this gift is all you need to know for a happy marriage. And, of course, the young man was excited. He's unwrapping the gift. His fingers are fumbling. And finally, he breaks the ribbon and gets it out. And he opens up this box. And inside is a golden watch. And he looked closely to it, and he saw that there was an engraving around the face of the watch. And it simply said these words: say something nice to Sarah. And he said those words stayed with him every day of his marriage. And that's why they lasted 50 years. This series is that simple. Getting off your donkey might be something as simple as saying something nice to your spouse. It's all about taking action and realizing that there are people in need, and God has enabled you to meet those needs. So often we say, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. There's a lot of things we can't do. But God has enabled everybody to do something. The parable of the Good Samaritan is universal. Wouldn't it be a nice thing if we collectively today, on our way out, all took the mission seriously and met the need of someone we came across? It's time to be the Good Samaritan. Good news is, Jesus is the greatest example of all by giving his life on the cross for our sins. He met the need that we couldn't meet for ourselves. This morning, if you need to make a decision for Jesus, I'd like you to meet me down front as we stand and as we sing.